I believe you already knew each other, you had been talking about working together, and finally the chance came up. But the character you play was originally a man, and you weren't sure. Somehow you became the minister. How did this work out?
뭐 흔히들 젠더 체인지라고 하더라고요. 그냥 이렇게 여자 역할로 바꾼 건데 사실 이분이 원체 이렇게 젠더를 초월하신 분이라 이거를 뭐 굳이 젠더 체인지라고 할 필요도 없고 어쨌든 이건 틸다를 위한 거다. 그렇게 진행이 된 거죠, 캐스팅이.
Well, we frequently call it gender change, and so this character changed into a woman. But, Tilda transcends gender, actually, so I think we wouldn't actually call it a gender change. So I just thought this is for Tilda.
My fantasy about Mason is that my jury is out on any gender for Mason. I mean, I had this whole fantasy about Mason's cabin. I mean, I'd like to go into Mason's cabin and, to find the thing that the wig gets put on and what's underneath that uniform. I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But there is a thing you've been doing over the last few years. I mean, actually since quite early in your career, but you started transforming, and you've become sort of the Lon Chaney of modern cinema.
Jonathan, you say the sweetest things. I love that.
So can we talk about how the project started? Because you basically were standing in a bookshop and you fell in love with this French graphic novel called Le Transperce-Neige. And why did you think it could be a film?
I don't know. I just fascinated by the graphic novel and 순채로 다 읽었어요, 서점에서. 그날 발견하자마자.
I read it instantly, standing in the bookshop all the way to the end.
다행히 그걸 살 돈이 있었어요. 돈을 내고 집으로 오면서 영화 해야겠다고 생각했죠.
Unfortunately, I had enough money on me to buy it. So as I was going home, I thought, by the time I got home, I thought I was going to make this into a film.
근데 되게 걱정을 많이 했죠, 주변에서. 이거 어떻게 영화 하려고 하냐. 근데 왠지 할 수 있을 것 같았어요.
There was a lot of concern from everyone else of how you're going to make this into a film, but I thought that it was possible.
틸다 덕분에 만들 수 있었던 것 같아요.
I think I could only make it because of Tilda.
진짜로.
I mean it, honestly.
And what were the elements in the comic that made you think this is a film? Because I don't know how much you have used the original visual elements or how much you changed the story.
As you see, the original concept, the basic idea is already super crazy. So it's a very strange idea. There's all the human survivors remain in the learning train, and also the rich people in the front, the poor people in the tail section. 이게 80년대 중반에 나온 이야기인데 어떻게 보면 너무 보편적이고 영원한 주제를 우리가 자본주의에 살고 있는 한은 벗어날 수 없는 주제를 다룬 것 같다는 생각이 들었었고요.
This is a story from the mid-80s, and it has such universal and eternal themes as long as we lived in a capitalist society.
근데 이제 뭐 그 기차가 1년에 똑같이 한 바퀴를 돌아서 다시 제자리로 돌아온다거나 여러 가지 디테일한 설정들은 제가 새로 만들어낸 게 많은데 일단 그 기본 발상 그 베이직 세팅 자체가 되게 위대하죠. 독특하고 방금 말한 그 달리는 기차에 생존자들이 있다는 그 발상 자체가.
But the concept of the train that rides for 1 year and goes around to end up in the same starting point, those kind of details I added myself and they're new, but the basic setting and the basic premise was really a truly great one, and that's really kind of an inspirational sort of premise.
And you worked together again on Okja after this, and it is your sort of eco-diptych, because these are two films both about in a way, the end of the planet and what we can do to stop it.
제 사촌이 저기 동물 그 보호 운동하는 그 사촌이 하나 있어요.
I have a cousin who works in animal rights.
She was former the vice president of Humane Society, and 그 사촌이 되게 무서워요. 저한테 막 야 너 고기 먹지 마 뭐 이러고. 그래서 그 시기에 자연스럽게 그 세계에 많이 깊게 빠져들게 됐었었는데.
This cousin's very scary to me. Just say don't eat meat and things like that. And at that time, I really was able to deeply immerse myself in this world.
근데 사실 그런 주제적인 것도 있지만 사실 틸다와 다시 특히나 틸다가 이제 1인 2역으로 쌍둥이로 나온다는 그게 더 저를 자극했죠. 그런 어떤 영화적 욕심 때문에 더 만들게 된 것 같아요. 옥자도.
So there was a thematic element such as that, but it was especially because of Tilda that I could have her playing two sort of characters as a twin. I think I got greedy from that to make it.
옥자는 사실 처음부터 틸다가 깊게 같이 창작하는 과정부터 같이 함께 했었거든요. 우리 이제 영화에도 보면 코-프로듀서로 같이 크레딧이 올라가 계시지만은.
With Okja, Tilda was actually involved from the very beginning deeply in the creative process, and she's actually credited as a co-producer.
I remember in the very early days when we first knew each other, we very quickly hit on, as everybody does who comes to love each other quickly, favorite films. And I remember we talked a lot about Miyazaki Hayao, and in particular My Neighbor Totoro. And I recognized the very first moment director Bong showed me. We'd been to the premiere of Snowpiercer in Seoul, and he was taking us to the airport the next day, and in the car, he wasn't driving, I will say, thank the Lord, because as we were driving, he handed me this little image. You're going to find it right now,
Yeah.
I can tell. A little image.
There are a lot of photos.
4 years ago.
None of the ones with Oscars in them. No,
Yeah, it was this.
that was it. And it was,
Oh, wow.
yes,
Yeah.
an image of a little girl.
You might need to lean forward a bit.
A little girl and a massive pig. And he just sort of showed it to me, sort of, forthcoming attractions, and I was smitten right there. But it did feel that it had a reference. It had a beautiful reverence for My Neighbor Totoro. And of course, also thinking of Miyazaki, those twin sisters in Spirited Away.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about them. And that's where the Miranda sisters were born, really.
Yeah.
How did you first meet, and how did you first discover each other's work?
We first met in 2011 in Cannes Film Festival. I was one of the jury member of the Camera d'Or, the new director award, and she was there with Lynn Ramsey film.
You need to talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
And we very naturally we met and we did a breakfast.
We had breakfast, a really big breakfast.
Yeah, not a dinner but breakfast, and it was first time we met. But 저는 사실 오래전부터 당연히 팬이었고 서울에 있는 작은 극장에서 올랜도가 개봉했을 때 어떤 그 생생한 기억이 있었죠. 그리고 틸다는 괴물에 대한 얘기를 그때 처음 했었던 것 같고요.
For me, of course, from a long time ago, I was a fan of hers. I remember in Seoul, in a very small cinema, seeing Orlando, and I think Tilda mentioned The Host.
Yes, I remember. In fact, the first thing I saw was I was waiting. I remember it so specifically. I went to have breakfast with someone in New York, and in a tiny little cafe, and I went for a pee, and I was waiting for this little loo to be open, and there was a copy of a New Yorker sitting there, and I read the review. I always went to the back of the film reviews, like we all do, and there was, I think, Anthony Lane's review of The Host, and there was something about that great review, which is something about great critical writing, that made me know I had to see the film, and I saw it quite quickly after that. And then I saw everything you'd ever made, including Barking Dogs Never Bite. I managed to find it.
Please forget
Why not? Go and look for it.
It's a
Go
serial
and look for
puppy killing movie.
Look for it. Look.
I'm so
Look,
sorry.
look. There's evolution. You ended up with Okja. All right. But it's amazing. And all of them, they're all masterpieces in their own way, and Memories of Murder and Mother, all of them. And then I met him.
Yeah, it was 2011. Yeah.
So how did you create this character then? Because some of the accounts I've read of Minister Mason describe her as, a little bit Margaret Thatcher and a little bit everyone, including Silvio Berlusconi. I can't quite see, but it's a pretty sort of heady mix as a a monstrous authority figure.
And you suggest the Yorkshire accent.
We thought about we thought about the phenomenon of this train. This is like a free pass for fantasy. And if you're going to have some kind of malign or a tendency towards some kind of malign authority, it's no holds barred. You can go any which way with it. And you don't have to go very far. And remember, this is quite a long time ago, and there were all sorts of examples that we didn't have then, that we have now to draw on. But in those days, we were looking at people like Colonel Gaddafi and Idi Amin and
many dictators,
Berlusconi. Just the way in which there is a tendency in society to find these dictators rather funny and amusing, like clowns. Very often there's this sense, and that those dictators can play up to that. And so we thought that we would work with that and turn her into this sort of, she's a construct. That's why I say this fantasy about what was going on in her cabin was real. I don't know what she looks like underneath all those. Maybe those are fake teeth and those ridiculous bottle glasses, and the wig is clearly not fixed on because it keeps moving around. That feeling of her being a sort of, as I say, there are other examples of people with power with mad hair. And
you remember? There was a beginning point of the.
Oh, I wanted it to fall off, and you wouldn't let me. Yes.
독특한 그 미니스터 메이슨 그 룩의 어떤 시작 포인트가 있었어요. 그 레퍼런스가 있었는데 그 박물관 레이디 우리 그 무슨 사진에서 발견한 건데 새 박물관의 어떤 그 여자분의 사진을 본 게 있는데.
So there was actually a starting point and a reference to the unique Minister Mason's look. There was a photograph of this lady in a museum, or a museum lady.
그분 가발이랑 안경이랑 이렇게 얼굴 느낌 같은 게 되게 독특했어요. 그걸 거기서 출발을 해서 이제 저랑 프로듀서랑 이제 우리 캐서린이랑 같이 틸다의 집에 가서 막 그 하루 종일 막 온갖 걸 다 해본 거죠. 그 트랜스포메이션 어떻게 할 것인지 일종의 그 라이브 쇼 같은 느낌이었어요. 어떤 룩을 만드는.
So her wig, her glasses, the very feeling of her face was quite unique. So that was our starting point. So alongside the producer and Catherine, we went to Tilda's home and we kind of went through this transformation, and it was almost like a live show to look for this look.
It was just, they came to stay and we made lunch, and then after lunch we went into the drawing room, and it was like dress up, and we just started to play like a bunch of 8-year-olds. And I don't know, it just sort of, but to be serious, we wanted to have this idea. For example, all these fake medals. That's real. These people, they give themselves medals. Gaddafi was a great one for giving himself photographs of like honors that he'd made up, and just pinning them on his uniform and making up uniforms. That's a thing.
On surface, but 이 인물의 출신은 그 워킹 클래스일 것이다. 아마 저 앞쪽에 기차에서 무슨 청소하던 사람이었는데 그 윌포드의 눈에 띄어가지고 이 사람이 막 계속 이렇게 그 신분 상승을 해서 미니스터 메이슨이 됐을 것이다. 뭐 이런 얘기도 하고 그랬었어요.
And we also sort of thought that perhaps the starting point for her was sort of working class. Maybe she was at the tail end as a cleaner, but she was sort of spotted by Wilford and climbed up the ranks and kind of progressed in that way. And we would talk about that as well.
And I'd had a little sort of riff in my own mind about Mason and Thatcher, these house builders somehow, and I just thought that she's what Thatcher would have been before Thatcher got all elocutioned and had her hair done. It was just this fantasy about the rawness of that predicament on that train, where you're not going to get edited, you're not going to get cleaned up, because you are free to be as bombastic as you want to.
And also her first image in the movie was also very important, because the movies in the opening movie start from the tail section, so we still don't know what it looks like in the very front section, the rich people. 근데 이분이 와서 이분의 모습 자체가 그 앞칸의 모습을 연상케 해주는 거고, 그 크리스 에반스가 전진하는 만큼만 우리가 기차칸을 볼 수 있기 때문에 그 당분간은 그 테일 섹션에 계속 그 붙잡혀 있어야 되기 때문에 이분의 룩이 중요했죠. 앞쪽 세계를 상징하는. 네.
So when she comes, she's kind of alluding to what it might be like at the front section of the train. You can only see as far into the trains as the character that Chris Evans plays really progresses. So really that was quite important, and that whilst they were sort of imprisoned at the tail section, you didn't know what the front section would look like, but it was really symbolized by her.
I wonder what it's like directing and acting in a film like this, because it's such a massive production. It was the biggest Korean film ever made. It was made at Barrandov Studios in Prague. And obviously very, very technically precise with these extraordinary sets. And at the same time, there is a feeling of spontaneity to quite a bit of it. And I wonder how much possibility you both have to play or to improvise as you're going through a production like this.
Actually, we built 26 different 26 different train sections. Actually, I want 28, but we negotiate because of the limited budget. So 26 different. Anyway, it was huge the production design. So 26 different train set and 그리고 평소 그렇듯이 뭐 스토리보드를 다 정교하게 한 거고 뭐 그 계획대로 찍는 편이니까. 예.
So as per usual, I have quite an intricate storyboard, and then I shoot as I plan.
Yeah, but for the acting, for example, when Minister Mason started her first speech in the tail section, 그 뒤에 누가 땡그랑 하고 뭘 떨어뜨려요, 쇠 같은 걸. 그게 계획된 게 아니라 실제로 떨어뜨린 거야, 그 뒤에 배우가. 근데 그걸 보고 즉각적으로 반응을 해가지고 이렇게 뒤 보면서 막 근데 그 모멘트가 되게 웃기거든요. 그러니까 그런 거를 화면에 담아냈을 때 정말 짜릿하죠. 그러니까 저나 감독으로서 계획하지 않은 건데 배우가 너무나 그걸 멋있게 이제 임프로바이즈 해줄 때 어떤 그런 쾌감이 있죠. 예.
So when Minister Mason in the tail end of the section gives her first speech, at the very beginning of her speech there's this sort of clang where an actor had dropped a bit of steel, but that wasn't actually planned at all. It was really the actor dropping the piece, but with a great actor sort of spontaneously improvising and reacts and kind of looks back, and that moment in the film is actually quite very funny. So as a director, to be able to capture that on screen, it's really quite thrilling, that even though it's not planned, to be able to have an actor who reacts in that way.
It's a really interesting thing. I've tried for years, ever since I've started working with director Bong, to explain why it is that this precision of his, which is really formidable, gives us, all of us, costume designers, producers, this feeling of freedom. And you go onto the set and you have not only a storyboard, which a lot of filmmakers work with storyboards, but you also have an editor. So you can be shown, okay, so we have up until this point. We have up until the point where Bong puts his hand in his pocket. We've got that much. Okay, the next bit we want is the bit from there to the time when he storms out. And we've shot that already, but that bit in the middle is free space. You can fill it. And it gives you this feeling of real license and collaboration, because of course your real aim is to amuse him. That's the point of every day, and he welcomes it and enjoys it. But you're working within these parameters, and it's a thing that I particularly love. I mean, I don't know what I would call proper actors say about this, but I like working within frames. But this particular frame, this particular precision, and it's a very holding thing. And so it means that you can really stay alive and amused, because you know where it's going to start and you know where it's going to end. And that's because the editor is right there, and you can look back, and then you've finished and you're moving on. You can look, and Director Bong says, come over and see what you've just done. And then you can see it. And you go, oh, I didn't know that my hand went so high. Okay, interesting. So when we do the next bit, I'll make sure that I come in from that high. And it's so productive and so interesting. And it's a very particular freedom.
Yeah. I love actors, and and each actor has their own. Every actor has their own universe, I think. Yeah.
And you have some extraordinary actors in this film. You've got a British, Korean, American, you've got Romanian, Icelandic actors in there. How do you make a big international production like this, which is going to work internationally, but it's also going to be Korean enough for a Korean audience? I wonder if there are particular things in this film, particular references which Korean viewers would get, which we might not in the West.
I don't know. It's a sci-fi film, and also it's a basic setting is already the human survivors that remain in the learning train. So 뭐 이건 인류의 생존자들이 있는 건데 그거를 뭐 이렇게 남한 북한 사람들로만 다 해서 하면 되게 이상하겠죠. 이게 자연스러운 것 같아요. 뭐 그 스코틀랜드, 루마니아 뭐 다 있는 이게 그래서 되게 자연스럽게 그냥 그렇게 캐스팅을 한 건데. 예.
Well, they're survivors of sort of mankind, so it would be sort of odd to divide them into South and North Koreans, and it was just naturally the case that we had the Scottish and the Romanians, and they obviously just naturally casting in this way.
그 제가 좋아했던 그냥 캐스팅이란 게 뭐 별다른 원칙이 있는 게 아니라 제가 좋아했던 영화에 나왔던 배우들을 다 이렇게 초청했죠. 예.
And there wasn't really much sort of rules behind the casting. I just asked all the actors I really liked.
Yeah, for example, the Vlad Ivanov, the Romanian, amazing Romanian actor. He was in the Christian Munzu, yeah.
4 months, 3 weeks.
3 weeks,
432,
yeah. And also that Icelandic actor Thomas Lemakis from the Noi Albinoi.
Yeah.
Such a lovely Icelandic film. I enjoyed. Yeah, kind of.
We were talking about difficult authority figures earlier, so I have to ask you, you had a run-in with Harvey Weinstein over this film, which was one reason why it was so difficult to see in some places, and I know he wanted to cut 25 minutes. And how did you resolve this? And I believe he objected to the fish scene at the beginning, and there's a story about
that. It's quite many years ago, and me and my DP really loved the shot with the big fish. Yeah, so it's 냄새가 너무 세가지고 촬영 현장에서는 좀 힘들긴 했었지만은 그 이미지 자체를 좋아했었는데 그 와인스타인님께서 그거를 좀 자르려고 했었죠. 예. 그뿐 아니라 뭐 많은 곳을 잘라내려고 했었지만은. 예.
It had such a strong smell. It was actually quite difficult while shooting, but we really just liked the image itself. But Weinstein was quite keen to cut it alongside many other things he wanted to cut.
So I told him, this is my personal something. This dedicated to my father. My father was a fisherman, and but yeah, he does fucking lie. So I feel sorry, but anyway, my father was actually a graphic designer. So, and he said, "야, 왜 빨리 말하지 그랬냐고. 이거 가족이 제일 중요한 거다. 그래서 저거 절대 자르면 안 된다라고 그분께서 얘기를 하셨죠."
So then he replied, "Oh, why didn't you say that before? Family is the most important thing. We must not cut this out."
Yeah, and
but he did cut 20 minutes out of it, and we discovered later, several years later, that was the Academy screener that went out.
Really?
At the time we didn't know. And actually there was a screening of that 25-minute cut, the shortened version of Snowpiercer. There was a screening in Paramus in New Jersey, in a huge multiplex.
It's where they do the testing.
Yeah, with
like testing site films.
With 200, more than 200 audience. Scoring the movie, and fortunately score was very low because so many things cut quite hard, difficult to understand the whole narrative. The score was low, so I was happy. Me and my producer was very happy. But he, the Mr. Weinstein, said, "Oh, quite low score, so let's cut out more." He said, and then, yeah. But anyway, in the end, it was very all happy ending. So it was got 리미티드 릴리즈를 하게 됐지만 어쨌든 감독 그 디렉터스 컷으로 이제 개봉을 시켰기 때문에 그분 입장에서는 그게 퍼니시먼트였을 수 있겠지만 뭐 우리 입장에서는 되게 기쁜 거였죠. 해피엔딩이었죠.
So it had a limited release, but at least it was a director's cut. Perhaps for him that was a punishment, but for us it was a happy ending.
But it'll be a really happy ending when it's distributed in this country, which it will be, we hope.
Oh, great.
We hope.
아니 뭐 사실 테마를 먼저 생각하는 편은 아니에요. 그러니까 뭐 예를 들어 이런 돼지를 찍고 싶다. 아니면 뭐 기차에서 2시간 안에 뭘 찍고 싶어. 이런 되게 단순한 충동이 더 우선이에요. 그래서 그런 거에 끌려서 이렇게 스토리를 이렇게 파고 들어가다 보면은 뭐 이런저런 주제에 도달하게 되곤 하는데. 예.
Honestly, I don't actually start with sort of those themes. I just have very simple impulses that come to me first. Like I like to shoot a pig or 2 hours of what happens on a train, and I dig deep, and then the story gradually evolves and gradually arrive at those themes.
But right, there is some connection between Snowpiercer and Parasite. Actually, the very first idea of Parasite came to me on around 2013 during the post-production of Snowpiercer. Those two stories all deal with the poor people and the rich people, but Parasite is very vertical movie, and Snowpiercer is very very horizontal. But in the very last moment of the movie Snowpiercer, in the very last the engine section, suddenly the Chris Evans all the horizontal move, but in the very last moment when he 이게 열었을 때 그 밑에 애가 있잖아요. 그래서 마지막에 잠깐 버티컬해지는 게 있는 것 같아요. 지금 와서 보니까 그 생각이 드네요.
When he opens the sort of latch on the floor and he looks down, there's a brief moment when the film becomes vertical. Now I realize, looking back.
Yeah, so someone in the basement. 대부분의 라이터 디렉터들이 마찬가지일 거예요. 쓸 때 이미 이제 이미지랑 사운드로 머릿속에서 작동은 되고 있는데. 예.
So most writer directors, I think, would be similar. That image and sound are already sort of tickling along in the sort of your head.
이제 인더스트리 표준에 맞춰야 되니까 저도 이제 뭐 파이널 드래프트 같은 데다 정리를 하긴 하는 거죠. 예.
But because we have to kind of match industry standards, we do a sort of final draft where it's all sort of neatly summarized.
근데 저는 이제 그 집이나 사무실에서 시나리오를 쓰지 못하고 그 고립된 데선 쓰질 못하고 항상 카페에서 써요. 커피숍 같은 데서 습관이 그렇게 들어가지고요. 예.
For me, I can't write at home or in the office. I can't write in sort of isolated places. It's just a habit of mine that I go to sort of cafes or coffee shops to write.
그래서 사람들의 소음을 좀 들으면서 이렇게 쓰게 되는데 사람들을 등지고 그게 좀 저한테 영향을 많이 미치는 것 같아요. 예.
So I like to write listening to the sounds of people, having my back to them. I think that really helps me to write.
다음 달부터 그 짓을 또 해야 된다 생각하니 되게 무서워지네. 예.
From next month, I have to do this thing again, and it's quite frightening for me.
Not so many times, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's
We just
rehearsal
shoot
and
it.
rehearsal. There's a sort of, this is the shape of the set, and, you know, don't walk here because you'll fall down, all that kind of rehearsal. But no, we like to just shoot, really.
Yeah, we just 뭐 이게 리허설 뭔가 아직 덜 짜여졌는데 그냥 이미 찍어버리죠. 예.
So this could be the rehearsal. It's not fully sort of formed yet, and as we do it, we just shoot it.
그러면 이제 약간 어색하거나 서로 약간 쭈삣하는 게 이렇게 화면에 담기게 되는데 그게 되게 리얼해 보이고 좋을 때도 있어요. 그게 뭐 항상 좋은 건 아니더라도. 예.
So there can be this slightly awkward sort of quality that you capture on screen, and that can be quite real and great, but not all the time. It doesn't always work out.
And also sometimes we develop develop something between takes. You remember when 그러니까 크리스 에반스가 이 틸다를 이렇게 잡으러 왔을 때 이제 누운 상태에서 이렇게 하는 거 있거든요. 삿대질하는. 그것도 이제 찍는 도중에 테이크하면서 그 동작을 만들어 보고 뭐 그런 거였는데. 예.
So there's a scene where Chris Evans is sort of trying to kind of grab Tilda and lying down, finger pointing, and that kind of came about in between the takes and sort of devising.
In the last moments of that X fight sequence, those kind of things. Yeah.
We shoot the rehearsals. That's it.
일찍 자세요. 예.
Go to bed early.
내가 안 자고 밤마다 영화 너무 봐갖고 건강이 지금 영화를 아침에 보니까 좋더라고. 일찍 일어나가지고 일찍 자고 일찍 일어나서 아침에 영화 보세요. 되게 영화가 잘 들어와요. 이렇게.
So don't stay up late to watch lots of films. I think it sort of ruined my health. But actually go to bed early, wake up early, and then watch the films early on, and then you can actually take it in much better.
Sorry, and
I would say stick with your friends. Stick with people, doesn't matter what skills they have, stick with people who make you feel like you can have the nerve, and just hang out with them and have the nerve and dare each other to do what anybody, and if you come anywhere near anybody who sort of goes, just steer clear. Only be with people who make you feel good.
저도 불안하거나 공포스러울 때가 많았었는데 옛날에 제가 이제 50세인데 이제 20대 때 저도 뭐 단편 영화나 학교에서 영화를 찍을 때 항상 여러 가지 불안감들은 많았던 것 같아요. 근데 모르겠어요. 그러니까 나 자신을 만족시키기 위해서 애써야 한다라는 생각만 계속했던 것 같아요. 그러니까 뭐 여러 사람을 생각할 게 아니라 내가 제일 좋아하는 게 뭔지. 예.
So for me also, I remember feeling quite anxious and scared a long time ago. I mean, I'm 50 now, but during my 20s, when I was at school or when I was making short films, I remember having a lot of anxiety. But I remember thinking that I really should only strive to satisfy myself and not trying to sort of satisfy others, that I should really look into what I like.
It's my job. And then 그 아주 사소한 거부터 출발하기 때문에 이제 이게 피처 필름에 걸맞는 어떤 스케일이나 뭘 이렇게 가졌다 그런 판단을 해본 적은 없는 것 같아요. 단지 이제 내가 얼마큼 거기 끌리는가, 계속해서 이렇게 땅을 파내려 가고 싶은 충동이 드는지, 그러니까 이제 충동이 강하고 이제 마음이 끌려야 계속 파내려 갈 수 있잖아요.
So because I always start from something very small, I don't think I've ever thought or made a judgment about whether there's enough scale or substance here to make a feature film, but more a case of how much does this appeal to me or how much impulse there is to sort of for me to keep on digging. You have to have quite a strong impulse to keep going.
제일 처음에 그 퍼스트 아이디어를 가지고 꼭 미리 판단할 필요는 없는 것 같아요. 아주 사소하거나 이런 것이 장편 영화가 되겠어? 라고 생각했던 아이디어가 아주 거대하고 엄청난 주제로 발전할 수도 있는 거라고 생각이 들거든요. 그래서 쓸데없이 일찍 사형 선고를 내릴 필요는 없다라는 생각이 듭니다.
I don't think you necessarily have to judge based on your first idea whether this can make a feature film or not. I think that whether it's something small or trivial, it could really develop into something quite grand as a feature film. So you don't really have to give it a premature death sentence.
Okay, and you're all done? Good, thank you very much. Well, listen, Bong Joon-ho is here, I believe, on this stage for one night only, but Tilda Swinton will be back here in conversation with luminaries, including Sally Potter, Wes Anderson,
Lynn Ramsey, the filmmakers with whom I made the Berger films. I'm trying to think into next week. Lots of people.
So come back for those. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you very much for giving your time and coming here tonight. And it's been great to have the film in spectacular full size. Bong Joon-ho, thank you so much. Tilda Swinton, and Say, thank you for translating.